Hey, I'm Delise.
And I'm Ginny.
We know that parenting comes in seasons, and even the smallest wins deserve a happy dance.
Join us as we chat with moms in every stage of the parenting journey, fixing our eyes on Jesus each step of the way.
This is Blessings and Motherhood, because we believe that you can hold tissues and confetti at the same time.
Hey guys, welcome to the show today. We are so excited to share this conversation we had with Andrew Pudewa. He is the founder of the IEW curriculum, and today's conversation is one that you really haven't heard before. He gets to talk about the mystical with us. We talk about some great resources to help motivate your children, and you're not going to want to miss it, especially at the very end.
So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Andrew Pudewa. Well, Mr. Pudewa, welcome to Blessings and Motherhood.
It's good to be with you.
For those who might be unfamiliar with you and your work at IEW, can you introduce yourself and kind of tell us how you started doing what you do?
Sure, yeah. I am the founder and director of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, and we publish curricular materials pertaining to the arts of language, listening, speaking, reading, writing, thinking. We have been doing this for full-time. I've been doing it almost 25 years. My background is in music education. I was a Suzuki violin teacher. I taught kinder music. And I kind of just stumbled into this business of teaching writing. And it happened that I was working for a small school in 1990, a long time ago. And we went up to Canada to take a course called the Blended Soundsight Program of Learning. And I did this with the faculty of the school, and I met Dr. Webster. I learned about the structure and style and composition approach and his program. And I thought immediately, wow, this is almost like a Suzuki method for teaching writing. This is the best thing I've ever seen. I came back, I taught it in the school. I created a little seminar for some homeschool moms in Seattle. I think the first one was 1994, so very close to 30 years now. And it went pretty well. And over the course of the rest of that decade, I kind of did both. I was teaching violin and then teaching some writing seminars, kind of refining the way I was doing it and building a little business. And it was enough of an enterprise that by the end of that decade, 99, 2000, I went full-time. I think we came on with Classical Conversations around 2002 in terms of being a part of the tutor and parent offerings for the essentials level. And it's just been growing like crazy since then. I have 7 grown children. My 16th grandchild was just born a few days ago, as a matter of fact.
Wow, congratulations.
So they're coming fast and furious. A girl, yes.
That's
second
awesome.
one for my youngest daughter. So life is good.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And I know from your Instagram, because I follow you closely, that you love to tell dad jokes. Now, I know I'm putting you on the spot right now, but do you have a dad joke right off the top of your head that you could share with us this morning?
Well, what's the difference between a dad joke and a bad joke?
That's a good one.
The first letter.
I gotcha.
This is not quite a dad joke, but this is one of my favorite jokes. There's a woodsman out in the forest, and he's chopping down trees, and he's about to chop down a tree, and the tree shouts out, "Stop, stop, don't chop me. I'm a talking tree." And the woodsman replies, "Yes, and you will die a log."
That's a good one.
I like the grammar put in there.
Oh, that's fun.
Now, Mr. Pudewa, I am so excited because next year I get to start the Essentials program with CC. So it will be my first year kind of getting to do the IEW with my son. We have started Fix It Grammar in this season of life, and I actually started it with my son and my daughter. But I have kind of a personal question. So I'm going to be new at this, and I'm a bit nervous to go into this IEW. What advice or maybe motivation could you give me as a nervous mom about to start the IEW program?
Well, let me respond by asking you a quick question. What are you nervous about? What do you imagine is going to be difficult or challenging or frustrating or problematic in any way.
Yeah, so I did not grow up homeschooled. I went to a private Christian school and we did do a lot of grammar, but my grammar background is very non existent. We did not start diagramming sentences, I think, till seventh grade, but it was pushed out. We did not really read any of the classics. So my reading level, I feel, is not up to par. I don't speak as eloquently as I wish I had because we just didn't focus on that when I grew up. So just very nervous about my background and then trying to teach that to my son or all four of my kids in a better way so that they grow up to learn to love to read and to learn to love to write.
Yeah, well, a couple thoughts there. Number one is, most of us, if not a primary reason, at least a secondary reason for homeschooling at all, is so that we can get the education that we didn't have in our youth. So you go into with excitement thinking, hey, I finally get to learn this stuff that was really fuzzy way back when. But I will say, I've had thousands of people have come through our teacher training course, the Teaching, Writing, Structure, and Style, which is what all the essentials moms and tutors get to do. And so many of them have said, wow, I feel like I learned more, in this 2 days, or I learned more from this course than I did, all those years in school, particularly about grammar. And the funny thing about grammar and English speaking people is that it's kind of irrelevant to us. We don't wake up in the morning and say, I really need to learn how to speak and write English. We grew up doing it. It's natural. And so you have it all in there. What's usually different for people is just the names of things, the labels of things. And so that's all you're doing is just learning, some new labels for things that you already know and already can do very, very well. So there's nothing to be nervous about. One point of advice I do give moms coming into, a CC group or, even a co-op or even just doing it on their own is, there's two aspects. There's the teacher training course, and then there's the student materials, which, in your case will be the history-based writing lessons for whatever cycle you're on. And it's very, very tempting to watch the teacher course. And when the video is over, just go back to normal life and do all your chores and take care of your, kids and your husband and go about life. But the real power is in doing the practicum assignments. So when it says turn off the video and make this outline, do that. When it says turn off the video, write this paragraph, use the checklist, do that. Turn off the video, work with a partner, make this, outline for Unit 3 or Unit 5. If you do all the practicum assignments yourself, then you really internalize the system. And then when you go to help your kids and teach kids, you know what you're doing. And that, I think, is the biggest differentiator there. And it is probably the number one reason why, overall, I would say classical conversations groups have the most success with the structure and style writing, because they get together in little groups. The moms watch the video, they hold each other accountable, and they do the practicum exercises. And that's what makes all the difference compared to, a co-op where you just drop off the kids and the kids go sit in the class and come home. What'd you learn? I don't know. Mm-hmm. So the more involved you can be kind of intimately learning the process, the more confident you'll be in teaching it.
I love that you said that. And we asked a bunch of our moms some questions they would want to ask you. And one of them actually did say, does he know that we have popcorn and Pudewa parties? And I think this is what she's talking about, right? Did you know that was a thing in the CC communities?
Oh, yes. It's been going on from way before you came around.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm excited to go to one.
and it's seasonal too, because in the fall, people will shift over and do pumpkin pie and Pudewa. Or they might do persimmon pudding in Pudewa if anyone's really ambitious to make such a thing. The best one I ever heard was pina coladas in Pudewa. That's probably toward the end of the school year when you're coming in on the home stretch, need a little extra boost. But yes, I think that, anytime you do something with someone, there's a synergy that allows you to learn it better, which is, the whole aspect of community learning. And that's why we want to have these communities, and the communities not just for kids, but for the moms to really nourish and nurture and support each other. So it's a fantastic model. It's hugely successful, and you are going to do just fine. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Well, thank you. I was also encouraged by another fellow CC mom who works for us as well to actually tutor essentials and learn the IEW in that way with my son in his first year. Because I told her, I said, I think I'm just going to take a year off of tutoring to really dive into this with banks. And she's like, no, you need to tutor essentials and learn it yourself. And that is the best way to learn it. And that's what I have done. I have committed now to tutoring essentials next year.
That's
Well,
cool.
and one thing I'll mention, some of the listeners may not know, we have for many years been doing one webinar a month, usually on the second Monday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we go through the history-based writing lesson unit for each month. So we start in August with Unit 1 and 2, and we work through, and these are free, these are available to anyone. And the original goal was to, really be there to answer questions and refine, what the tutors and home teaching parents are doing, just so that we clear up any little points of confusion that may come up along the way. So please do, put that in the show notes or let everybody know. I think, a lot of CC people come in, and if the director doesn't know about it, then they don't know about it. And it's a great resource. And the recordings, of course, are available for people who can't do it live.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. We will put that in the show notes for you guys. So definitely take a look at that. And switching gears just a little bit, we know that the foundation of writing is reading. If you don't know words, you have no words to write. And I personally was a little bit slower to catch on with reading. It just didn't come as naturally to me. And now, as a parent, I'm kind of thinking through, okay, what is it going to look like to encourage a child who may be struggling with reading or maybe has some of those challenges that I had? Could you speak to two things? Number one, just to encouraging a parent who does have a child who might be neurodivergent or something like that, and how they can encourage their child to love reading even when it's a challenge for them. And then can you illuminate for us ways that IEW will sort of support that parent in that process?
Sure. Yeah. Some people who've listened to some of my talks are aware that my sixth child, who was the only boy out of the seven children, he did not read four-letter words until he was 10 years old. He didn't read a book of any sort until he was 12 years old. He was reading and writing extraordinarily well at 14 and went off to university, did very well. He's a very successful adult. But there is this tremendous angst that people have. And I think a lot of it comes from the schools that have kind of brainwashed everybody into thinking, oh no, if your kid isn't reading, well by 6 or 7 years old, then it's a disaster and life is going to be horrible and he's going to fail forever. And this is just
Sure.
simply not true. There is no evidence to support either the idea that early reading is a predictor of better academic success in the later teenage years, or is there any evidence to show that a student who isn't reading easily till 8 or 9 can't also have very good academic success, as I experienced with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of resources on our podcast, which is the Arts of Language podcast, with dyslexia experts, learning, challenge. People have specialized in the area of learning challenges. We have a lot of resources there. So anyone who would like to learn a little bit more, hear this story, hear my son, and on a podcast talk about what it's like to grow up dyslexic. But there are many reasons as to why children don't take to reading as quickly or as easily as other children. And therefore, the single most important thing for every parent to do in any given day is to read aloud to their children at a level above the children's decoding skills.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a 5, 6-year-old who's just trying to, squeeze words out of text on page, the stuff they're using is intellectually unstimulating, sometimes even insulting, Max the cat sat, Max sat and sat, the cat
You're
sat and
not
sat. You're
wrong.
just like, ah, ah. So, you have to go through that period of practicing decoding skills, but the
Mhm.
reward for children isn't in the content of the reading, it's in the solving of the puzzle of figuring out what those words are and meeting that challenge. So, what you want to do is never stop reading out loud to children. If they have this reluctance to read or a diagnosed issue with auditory processing, or most commonly is dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADD, whatever. Read aloud to them and never stop reading aloud to them, and do that in as much quantity as you can possibly squeeze into every day. And then what you find is that the child is actually falling in love with literature. The child is wanting to read. The child is actually building the database of language in the brain, the vocabulary, the syntax, the grammar, the kind of dictionary of allusions and simile and metaphor that's rich in literature. And then whenever their vision and neurology starts to click and they start to read on paper more independently, they have this great, huge resource and reserve of language that informs their independent reading and writing down line. So, I often tell people, if what you want 20 years from now is a child who will speak and write English well, the most important thing isn't, to push them to read on their own or the study of grammar or whatever. It is reading aloud to them in huge quantity from a young age, and even past the age at which they start to read on their own. So you're always pulling up the comprehension level.
Mhm.
And, a lot of kids come into essentials on the young side.
Sure.
And that first year in essentials can seem a little bit daunting. They're faced with a block of text that they've maybe never looked at anything quite that stiff looking before. And so the basic advice we always give is to, just do it with your kids. Read it with them, read it aloud, read it again, read it a few times, get it into the ear really well so they understand it, and then go ahead and dive in and start those keyword outlines, start the process of doing the composition side of it, and just help as much as is needed. And then you get, a good result. And then usually by the third year in essentials, the kid's like, okay, mom, I got it. Leave me alone.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what
Definitely.
you love to see.
Yeah, that's encouraging for me to hear. So my son, Jenny, I already told you, she's got 4 kids of varying ages, and my son right now is 2, and when I found out I was gonna become a mom, I've always enjoyed books, but as I told you, reading was a challenge for me, and I really wanted to tackle that in a new way as a mother, and so I purposed in my heart, because I think honestly I'd heard you say that you should read to your kids. So I purposed in my heart to start reading to my son, so, like, even when he was an infant, I would just read him chapter books that I enjoyed, children's books or things that were appropriate for him to hear. And now he's 2.5, but his vocabulary, that's the thing that people comment on all the time, because I just read to him during bath time, or I read to
Yep.
him when we're sitting in random places when it seems like he's not listening. But it's not only really helped me to grow in that short period of time in a way I really wanted to, it's helping him. And he's not even trying to read yet. So that really is encouraging.
Now, do you have any maybe creative or imaginative approaches on trying to motivate our children who may not enjoy reading as much? I have one of those at home right now. She can read pretty well. She's 7, but she would choose not to read. Is there any way you can kind of help me push her along?
Well, a few thoughts there. I will say that overall, all children in our country and probably most of the developed world do not read as much as they did 20 years ago. And that, unfortunately, is true for homeschool kids and even homeschool kids in a classical education environment. Why? Basically, screens.
Mhm.
It is extremely important to minimize screens in the life of young children. And by the word young, I would say absolutely 3, 4, 5 years old, but even up to 9, 10, 11 years old, because the screens are visually hyperstimulating. They take kids in many ways out of the language area of their brain and put them into a different way of interacting. And most of it is below their intellectual capacity. So it has the side effect of kind of dumbing them down. There are obviously some reasons as to why it's convenient from time to time to use a screen to babysit a kid while you go wash your hair or whatever you have to do. But I would guess that if you were to look at the correlation, causation, the rise of screens in the home and the ubiquity of screens corresponds with the decrease of reading overall. And, I'll go to a homeschool convention. 20 years ago, every kid at a homeschool convention had their nose in a book while mom was,
Oh, yeah.
chatting, and they're trying to not die of boredom. And now the kids are more likely to have a phone or a tablet or something than a book. So that's an environmental factor, and that would be the number one thing. Another thing that is kind of on the rise is this idea that most kids just believe they have a right to be entertained all the time.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
I remember being a kid, and I think my older children experience this. It's like, you don't have a right to entertainment. Just go occupy yourself, go be bored. Boredom is good.
Yes.
Where are you going to go if you're bored? Well, you're going to go to the Legos, the blocks, or the bookshelf, creating kind of a vacuum where there's nothing else to do will actually force kids to go pick up books on their own. And that seems a little, I don't know, manipulative, but it's all about creating the environment. The second thing I would say is you can get kids to read books if you kind of lead them in and then let them go. I'll give you a couple examples of this. My son, who I said did not read a book till he was 12 years old, the very first book he read was The Bark of the Bog Owl by Jonathan Rogers, and I would guess it to be at maybe a 4th, 5th grade reading level. So he really didn't spend any time reading the drivel that we, practice on at 6, 7. He had all the phonics information in his brain. He just needed to get old enough so he could get his willpower and wrestle his eyes and brain into doing it. But what happened was I started reading the book to him. I got about 3 or 4 chapters into the point where it was really exciting. And then I said, I've got to go on this business trip and I'm going to be gone a few days. Don't read the book without me, because I want to be sure, that I, get to read it, because it's so interesting, isn't it? And I left it in his room and probably kind of winked at him. So he knew this was not a command that must be obeyed. And by the time I got back, he was 4 or 5 more chapters into the thing. Obviously, it was very slow going, but that type of external motivator. My grandson, who was not really wanting to read much of anything, he could, but he would never choose to do it because he always had other things he wanted to do. He got roped in by this intense desire to watch the Lord of the Rings movie, and his mother very wisely said, "Nope, not till you read the book."
Yeah.
So he's like, "Okay, I'm going to have to pay the price. I'll start right now." And he started slogging through this thing. And of course, it's small print. It's a big, huge, thick book. And once he got about a third of the way into it, he started to realize if he would spend a little more time every day, he would go a little faster. He would read a little more, which meant that the distance between right now and when he gets to watch the movie would decrease, and he'd get to watch the movie sooner. So he was very motivated on that. And one more trick I tried, this is again with my son. I tried it with some of the other kids too. I wanted them not only to read, but I wanted them to also develop the ability to read aloud decently well. And you have to practice that. It's not an automatic thing. So I would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You've got dishes tonight. Yeah, it's on the chores rotation. It's the worst job. Mom used a lot of pots and pans. Poor you. Tell you what, I'll read to you while you do the dishes. Or if you prefer, I'll do the dishes for you if you read to me." And he would pretty much always take the deal. And then I would just wash the dishes very slowly, trying to milk it for all it's worth. And so,
I
there are
love that.
a lot of strategies, but an interesting research paper kind of summary I came across a long time ago. I don't know the original source, but it was evidently research that was commissioned by the American Library Association. What is the number one predictor in the lives of adults who like to read books? Having been read to a lot as a child. So there you go.
That's
I don't know that you have a magic wand and say, okay, child, like this, but
yeah.
you can manipulate the circumstances and move them in that direction.
Hey guys, we want to interrupt the show to talk to you guys a little bit about practicum. So if you've never been to a practicum, you definitely need to go. This practicum is hosted by classical conversations leaders around the globe, and it's basically a small parent conference that combines encouragement with your community, integration of ideas, and practicing the classical tools. It's a one-day investment that's going to pay off all year, and this year practicum's focus is learning the art of teaching math classically, and that's the best way to study math. So in addition to that, you are going to learn more about the Math Map, which is the first and only classical conversations math curriculum. You'll get to participate in table talk discussions with other parents and to learn how to engage your student in math conversations that transcend the ages. So if your child is 5 or 15, you'll still be able to talk about these things together. You'll also discover how the classical tools of learning and dimensional structure of mathematics help us frame questions and find patterns that enable us to see the unseen and better understand God in our universe. To find out when your practicum event is going to be, visit ccpracticum.com. That's ccpracticum.com.
Yeah, I love that because that was me. I don't remember being read to aloud a lot when I was younger. And so I'm really having to push myself out of this shell, like, let's read to the kids. But I enjoy it. We do it a lot of time at night. And now they get on me when we don't have time to read. If we get home late, they're saying, but mommy, you've got to read. And I'm like, I know, but it's 9 o'clock. I don't know which is
And
better right now.
we should give a shout out to our dear friend Sarah McKenzie and the Read Aloud Revival and all that she has done to motivate, encourage, and curate, book lists and bring to the awareness of, moms all over the place. And she's kind of accomplished what I wasn't, which is to really get outside the homeschool world and really be bringing this, the good news of why there's so many benefits of reading aloud to your family, to the general parent population. I'm so grateful and proud of her.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, I know you've shared a lot about your son having some difficulties and a little bit about your grandchildren, but was there ever a time in your life where you actually struggled with something with reading or writing that you could share with us?
I don't remember not being able to read. And so a lot of my, the bored hours of my childhood, I was, looking at books. I grew up with the complete Andrew Lang fairy tale series,
Right.
the blue fairy tale book, the red fairy tale book. I had the whole thing, Lord of the Rings and the World Book Encyclopedia. That was my bookshelf at home. And I remember they made me read books in school, but I remember very few of them. What I remember mostly is reading fairy tales and Lord of the Rings. And I loved the encyclopedia because you could just open it up and start learning all sorts of random stuff you weren't even looking for. And I kind of mourn the demise of the big, 26 volume set of encyclopedia on the family bookshelf. I do remember in school not liking writing stories. And the teacher would always say, okay, children, today we're going to write stories. You can make it all up, write whatever you want. And I just remember thinking, oh, Lord, no, I can't do that. I can never think of anything because I would get, once upon a time, there was and then just, a long pause, like, no, there's nothing there. Tears starting to drip on my paper. I can't think of anything. I don't know what to write. inevitably I'm right across the aisle from some girl who's 4 pages into her next
Oh, of
novel
course.
by the time I've got Once Upon a Time There Was up. And I remember, just thinking, how can she do that? But in retrospect, I'm pretty sure if the teacher had said, hey, Andy, you don't have to make up something completely new. You could retell a story that you read, or retell a story your parents read to you, or retell a story we read in class. I could have done that. I could have retold something. I think my frustration was I was operating under this unspoken law that somehow I had to make it all up on my own, and I couldn't use ideas from anywhere else. And that's what made it overwhelming. And so, again, when I found the Structure and Style program, and I realized this is how you learn to write stories, by retelling and elaborating and making variations and using a model that works. Then you can write a story that works, and you can be somewhat proud of that. And then that, of course, motivates you to try again and again. I didn't seem to have a problem with reports, because that was pretty easy. You just copy from the
Sure.
encyclopedia and change a few words here and there. So that wasn't a real difficulty for me in the report. But boy, that writing fiction and stories and being creative, it's because, I didn't understand what that was. And now I do. So it's a lot easier.
I think sometimes for parents, there's this temptation to feel like everything that we do, everything that we learn, everything that we invest has to be intentionally and specifically for our children. And it's good. It's good to pour out, and it's good to serve other people. I do believe that's a holy calling. But when it comes to learning to love reading, learning to love writing, and growing as a person so that you can have something to pour out, I've started to notice that there is a perspective of reading or learning as an indulgence. Is that something that you've heard or seen?
Well, I think it is a symptom or an outcropping of our belief that if we are busy, then we are somehow doing good. Like, everyone's goal is to be busy, to do as much as possible. This is, particularly true in the workplace. It's very true, I think, with people who are self-employed or homeschooling or both, because you get this idea, like, the more I do, the better results I will get. The harder I work, the more my business will grow, the more money I'll make. Therefore, it's good to be working 16 hours a day. And it's good if I'm always, doing my lesson planning and organizing my homeschool materials and shopping for the next curriculum thing and creating the checklists for my kids and all that. And I think what we're seeing is hopefully a pushback against that a little bit. I certainly, spent many years believing that if I, slept more than 5 or 6 hours a day, I was lazy. And that if I wasn't working in every spare moment, I was somehow failing to reach my potential. And I really wish I could go back and catch those years with my kids and say, you know what, to work 8 hours a day is plenty. And to do more than that isn't necessarily going to improve anything. And take that time and give it to my kids, and also to give it to myself. I don't like the term self-care, because that goes into a whole area that seems indulgent in some way. But what is true caring for yourself, caritas, charity, having charity to yourself, and taking those little bits of time that you need to align yourself properly, whether that's, a short morning ritual that you can squeeze in before the kids start to demand all of your time, or whether that's, convincing your husband to watch the kids because I'm going to go, one night a month, leave for 2 or 3 hours and be in this book group with the other homeschool moms, or just disciplining yourself to trade 20 minutes a day of, valid social media, because you're always interacting and getting ideas from other like-minded people that's going to be useful for you, but kind of trading that for 20 minutes of reading a good or great book that's going to actually make you a better mom, a better parent, a better spouse, a happier person. And that's just little, I would say, micro disciplines. I should probably try to coin the term or something.
Absolutely. Do
But
it or we will.
Micro discipline, but it connects with things like James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, which is I would highly recommend that to any homeschool parent, to any teenager. Read that book Atomic Habits, and you learn that change happens in very small increments of consistency.
Oh, that's so good. Now we're talking about reading all the books. And I really want to know, Andrew, what are you reading right now?
Well, I'm going to confess that the book I finished last night is neither good nor great or a classic, although I have reasons for liking it. I read the original Hunger Games trilogy when it came out for various reasons. I thought that the first book was extraordinarily well written and could have gone into the canon of great dystopian literature with 1984 and Brave New World. I was disappointed in the later books and very disappointed in the movie, but I think she's a very, very skilled author. So I just finished the newest book, The Ballad of Snakes and Songbirds, or Songbirds and Snakes, whichever. And I was not disappointed. I think it addresses a very, very important moral question, which is how does a person go to the dark side? And so I did that. But right before that, I listened to this book, How to Think Like Shakespeare by Scott Newstock, which I cannot recommend too highly. Subtitle is Lessons from a Renaissance Education. This is one of the most well-written. His prose style is just engagingly magnificent, or magnificently engaging, I suppose. And it's really not so much about Shakespeare himself, but about the type of education that Shakespeare and his contemporaries would have had. His chapter titles are, I'll read a few: of thinking, of ends, of craft, of fit, of place, of attention, of technology, of imitation, of exercises, of conversation, of stock, of constraint, of making, and of freedom. And I will tell you, I knew immediately this guy, I was going to have to get him on my podcast. He's just so brilliant. And so many of the things that he's articulating are things that I've been trying to communicate and help people understand. Only he's 100 times smarter than me and more educated. And so his prose is like me, only much, much better and bigger. So I really enjoyed this book, and I'm now actually starting in on the third time of this book. I also read a book, The Medieval Mind of C.S. Lewis, which was also kind of about how, Lewis brought into his writing this richness of the medieval, the Renaissance, where the mystery of life and the supernatural were really accepted by everyone, and we hadn't been infected by this, modern skepticism, Darwinism, misguided into the point of, eliminating the supernatural from the imagination of humanity. So those are some of the things I've been contemplating.
Very cool.
I do every year. I kind of announce my best book of the year. And so this is definitely wins the prize for best book of 2023.
Awesome.
And I did do a podcast interview with him. It was so good. We had to do a double episode. So I do recommend it to all parents, whether you're homeschooling or CC or whatever. That book is just absolutely captivating. He's not a homeschool dad himself. He's got his kids in a school. So some of the interesting points he brings up are, what does he see going on in the classroom that his daughter is actually in and experiencing?
That is cool. I will try to make sure to put that in the show notes as well, so people can go listen to those two podcasts. And what you said about C.S. Lewis and the book that you were reading, reminded me of an episode that Jenny and I recently recorded about Santa Claus, actually. And I was talking about the fantastic and the mystical and the fact that those things are real and kind of contrasting that with the things that our culture, for lack of a better term, is trying to convince us are true. And I'd love to hear just some of your thoughts on that and why you think they're trying to sort of wash our consciences of the reality of the fact that the world is so multifaceted.
Wow, that's a string of a question. Well, C.S. Lewis made a statement that a myth is not, it's not something that isn't true. That's not the definition of a myth. A myth is something that is larger than life. And for him, Christianity turned out to be a myth that is true. And so when we contemplate the supernatural through fantasy, which is, a way that, from ancient times, we've been telling stories of the fantastical. It allows us to apprehend, to contemplate those things which are larger than what we encounter in our day-to-day experience. And I think that this is so very helpful, because when we start to see the supernatural in nature, in creation, in each other, in relationships, then that strengthens faith. Faith being, what is it? The evidence of things unseen. We can either pursue the idea that there is a whole reality out there that we don't perceive through our limited five senses, and then look forward to embracing that as we get the hints and the signs and the illuminations and the insights and the intuitive things that come to us in a subtle spiritual way. Or we can just discredit all that and say, nope, don't believe anything that I can't actually measure.
Sure.
Well, I mean, without even getting religious about that, you would just say, which is going to give you a richer life? Embracing the possibility of the supernatural, or discrediting it entirely. And so that's why I feel like children are just naturally inclined toward wanting to hear the stories of the invisible world, the invisible universe, the fantastical, because they know children are born into this world, and I believe they come in with a certain knowing that there are supernatural things, and it's only the programmed mechanization violation. I will go even so far to say it's a violation of their imagination by primarily the modern education system and the idea that if it isn't scientific, it's not. If it's not scientifically provable, it's not. You can't know it to be true. That's a violation of their imagination and a crime. And so we have to realize that we have kids and they live in a world that wants to do that to them. And we have to be on their side and cultivate that imagination in every possible way. And they'll sort it out. They'll start to realize, well, that's a myth. That's a story. People told that story. But why do they tell the story? Because it points to a higher truth. And, some good books on fairy tales, the virtues, the Mysteries of Life in Children's Literature by Mitchell Kalkpegian goes right to that point, showing that a myth, a fable, a parable, a fairy tale very often points to a higher truth. And that's why it's real, not because the characters really existed. But, we could go and say, well, most history books are probably most of them not true anyway, because they're all written by people who weren't even there. And even if you went to primary sources, what really happened? Well, you don't,
Right.
nobody knows. And so, I would almost go to the point of saying there's more capital T truth in a book of fairy tales than there is in a history textbook. And of course, science is crazy. I mean, science 100 years ago, what did people actually believe? Now we believe something different. Does that mean that now we've reached the immutable facts about science? I doubt it. I don't know if that
I love
answered
that.
your question or not, but that's what
Absolutely.
came to my mind.
Yes, 100%. Definitely.
Yeah, that was good. I love it. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on with us today.
It is a pleasure, and I will be happy to hear what you do with it all. And I'm glad I found out about your podcast, because I listened to a couple of the past episodes, and I thought, oh, these ladies are fun. They like
Oh,
to
thanks.
they like to get to some meaty stuff that's also tastes good. So you're doing a great job, and I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. And we will let you know what we do with it. You will see this very soon in 2024. And until then, we are just so grateful for your work. And so take care.
You too. God bless you.
All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mr. Pudewa. We probably could have talked to him for another hour or two. And after we stopped recording, he said that he would come back on the show. So if you had a question that you asked us online and we didn't get to it, just know that we've made a note and we are planning to talk to him very soon.
That's right. So go follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, all of the good things. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, because we really value you guys' comments and input.
Yeah. And if you have a friend who might enjoy this show, maybe somebody who is intimidated by the Essentials program, or someone who has a child who is struggling to read, please send this show to them. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss our next episode, and leave a review so that more people can find it.
So you guys have a great day.
Bye.